Not sure how to measure your internal communications? Prove the worth of your internal communication strategy with Contact Monkey's email solution, built into Outlook and Gmail. With Contact Monkey, you will be able to track and analyze employee engagement from your inbox. Start measuring email opens, link clicks, location tracking, and various forms of employee feedback, such as Employee Net Promoter Score. To try Contact Monkey's free demo, visit www.contactmonkey.com/ICPro. I'm Sarah Jackson. Welcome to Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. This season, we're closing the gap. I've tracked down the experts that can help us as internal communicators close the gap from where we are now to where we need to be. We're connecting the dots to drive value and lead from the inside out.
We do this every year, but particularly now, looking at those channels and understanding what the audience is like right now and how dramatically that has changed our audience, but also their habits and how they want to be communicated with, but really understanding how we can make that more interesting and how we can get more data from it. That's going to be definitely a theme throughout our conversation, is very much the year of data and analytics and trying to see how those changed behaviors and changed COVID changes generally have impacted what we do. Are we hitting the mark? Are we hitting those success criteria? And so we definitely need the data to be able to do that.
That's Lauren Ritchie, Manager of Internal and External Communications at RACQ in Australia. Welcome to our finale episode, and wow, what a season it has been. A season of immense growth and change. You know, our theme for this season of the podcast has been Close the Gap. I not only think we closed the gap, I think we leapfrogged into a whole new, bigger and vast world that in the end unearthed our need to not only communicate and engage employees, but to lead them. Many of us got into this business because we love telling stories. Never did we realize that we'd be called to be strategists, designers, technical support, and heck, this year some of us were even consulted on what type of plexiglass to order. Today, our podcast expands to Australia. We go down under to learn how to get above the work to be strategic, so we can tell the stories that will engage the hearts and minds of those we work with. This and much more on today's show.
My name is Lauren Ritchie. I'm the Manager of Internal and External Communications at RACQ. And you can probably tell by my accent, RACQ is an Australian company. I'm here in Australia, in Queensland, which is a state in Australia here. So we look after, essentially we're like your AA in the US. So we are the state's peak motoring body, or as many people would think of us as roadside assistance or their insurance, or we also have a bank as well. So we are a car club by its old background, but so much, much more than that, 115 years after we were first established.
Well, I know during our prep call, you were telling me about, you had this amazing backstory. You started in journalism. Would you mind sharing that? Because you haven't always been in the world of internal communications. So share a little bit of your backstory with our audience.
Sure. I was a television reporter or a journalist, a broadcast journalist, what we refer to it here in Australia as, for 6 years before I moved over to what they call here the dark side, which is communications. So switching from journalism to comms. And I started in external comms, which is just essentially taking care of, in essence, PR, but for our advocacy division. So advocacy as part of RACQ is essentially to represent our members. So we have 1.8 million members who are part of our club, and it's our job to stand up for them and lobby state governments, federal governments, for things that our motorists are really after: cheaper fuel, better roads. We're all about road safety. That is our bread and butter. So advocacy is a department within RACQ that really is genuinely about what the members are after. We don't have bottom line KPIs. We are here to ensure that we are doing the right thing on behalf of all those members. So yeah, I switched to external comms 8 years ago, and then I moved into internal comms the very week COVID-19 hit here in Australia, which was March 18th. And I took over internal comms the day we were all sent home. So it was a very interesting baptism of fire to internal comms land for sure.
Absolutely. And I want to hear that story because a lot of our listeners found themselves doing lots of different types of role, kind of this, like you had mentioned, baptism by fire type roles. Tell me about, and particularly, I think it's interesting. We have a lot of listeners all over the world, but I would say the majority of our listeners are here in the U.S. So to hear from a global perspective in Australia, tell us about the COVID pandemic experience, I guess, from down under.
Yeah, I mean, it's not vastly different to other parts of the world in that there was this mass exodus. So we have around 2,500 staff, and it was sort of COVID was obviously brewing along in the background, late 2019, but it wasn't probably in Australia until about February, March that people started to be talking about there's this thing, and then it got called a pandemic. And then quite quickly, RACQ decided within a couple of days that we would move all 2,500 staff, pardoning those staff who work in our branches, so our stores, or those who work on roadside, so roadside assistant, tow truck operators. They would all move home and work from home. For RACQ, this was a very strange concept. We were probably a little bit backward in our flexible work arrangements prior to COVID-19. There weren't that many people who had flexible work arrangements where they could work from home, or even down to, say, 9-day fortnights or 4-day weeks or part-time. We're a little bit behind in that respect. So to turn the switch, flick the switch, and send 2,500 staff home and working from home was insane. The technology part of it alone, just to get people up and running, because there are people that had just had desktops, just had computers that were attached to their desk. We had to physically get all of those computers and technology to get people to work from home, and then VPN. And I don't profess to be a technology expert, but I'm told it was quite a task to get us all working from home. And from March 18th up until October 1st, I myself and my team have been working from our dining room tables for a long time. And we're very fortunate here in Australia, and in particular in Queensland, that COVID restrictions have been eased right back. We don't have international borders open at the moment, and our states' borders are only just beginning to open, just as of today, which I know we are calling in the future. So it's the 3rd of November now, but we are just opening up our borders to another state today. And there are still states that are blocked off from us. So for a state-based organisation, that has been really tricky for us to have. We have a travel business on top of what we do. So, we've not been, unlike any other organisation that has been impacted by COVID. So, and coming in and out of the office and trying to, particularly with internal comms, is communicate all of those changes and to communicate with staff who are remote working, but equally there are still staff that weren't. There were staff that were in branches and stores, and our roadside staff continued pretty much the status quo. So trying to find the balance between communicating and making sure we've got all the information out there for those who are at home, but not ignoring those people who that it hasn't impacted their everyday lives.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you because I know that the topic that we're going to be discussing today is one that's going to be really helpful to our listeners, because so many people I think we're urging our listeners, our theme for this month is pause. And there's a power in a pause, and to try to get above the work enough to take some time to be strategic. And this whole season, we've been trying to close the gap and give our listeners like a few solid things. Like, what's the one thing that you can do each week to move you from point A to point B? And I heard about the whiteboarding strategy session that you did with your team. And you're so great. I'm just so grateful that you would give us a sneak peek into how you led that, and an activity that you had talked in our prep call about, with kind of how you're going to declutter almost your digital channel strategy, because some of them are relevant and some of them are not relevant anymore. Would you mind kind of walking us through that a bit and giving us insight into how you facilitated that, what it was, and what you did there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work here in Australia in a financial year, which starts 1st of July through to June 30. So come end of July, early August, we got the team together in person, which is had been a very interesting thing to do because we hadn't seen each other in 6 months or so, and that was great. And we were able to go to our old office, which was empty. So we able to do the COVID safe thing. And essentially we had a full strategy day and looked at every single element of what we do as internal communicators, and basically really looked, as you say, overarchingly, and stopped and paused. Particularly now, we do this every year, but particularly now, looking at those channels and understanding what the audience is like right now and how dramatically that has changed our audience, but also their habits and how they want to be communicated with. So we did presentations. Everyone in the team gave presentations on a particular element of our roles. So it might be our videos. So we do a lot of internal comms videos. We're very privileged to be able to have three videographers who work with us full time. So there's a great audiovisual element to our stuff. So someone gave elements on and presentation on what's working in videos, what isn't working in videos, and is this something that we want to increase, decrease, or modify that particular channel. And I really recommend having your team do the presentations rather than the reverse, where you present to them. You get so much more buy-in from your team members if they're having to do a little bit of homework before coming. And it also gives them, because they're on the tools every day doing these sorts of things, they know really well what is working and what isn't working. And then as a collective team, we can sort of talk about where we want to take that particular element of our work, and see if that fits within our strategy. So we gave lots of presentations on each element of it, but then we popped up a bunch of post-its on the wall of every channel that we have. So Yammer, EDMs or email sends, our intranet, our videos, as I stated before, Yam Jams, which if anyone uses Yammer, sort of like a live all-in live question scenario, what we call Yam Jams. So we put everything up that we do as an output on the wall, and much like spring cleaning, we looked at it and put it into 3 piles. So it was the let's keep it, that is still a relevant channel and a relevant output for us to be doing, given the remote workforce, given COVID-19, given everything that has changed in the way we do work at RACQ. So there's the keep pile, there's the ditch pile. So we have this very hot property pre-COVID, which was toilet door posters. The messages on the back of the toilet. They were utilized by every department across the group, and internal comms is a group-wide function. And so we would have people in our well-being team who would say, it's, whatever month this month, we really want a toilet door poster. Can you get us up one? We really want the back of the door. We want eyeballs on those posters. Obviously, with people working from home, we can't pay people to use toilet door posters as a channel. That thing has gone. It is no longer a channel at all for us moving forward, because RACQ have decided now, moving forward, that working from home in the future is definitely the way forward, and people can choose whether they want to return to the workforce in a physical setting, in a premises, or not. So for us, that channel, not at all relevant. So we did put it in the ditch pile. Unless the world dramatically changes, it's no longer going to be a channel of choice for our audience, but for us as communicators either. And then we had the modify element. So kind of like your I guess your winter wardrobe that either needs to, there's some holes in it and needs to be stitched up, or it needs to be altered in some way. That was what we had in the center. So a lot of those channels that were still okay, but we needed to change the way we use them to suit the audience. And in particular, for us, it was our what we call EDM, so our email marketing to our people. We wanted to freshen it up. It was pretty old. It needed a refresh, COVID or otherwise, but really understanding what our audience and how they communicate and how they utilize emails. For us, it's still a very much a channel of choice for our people, but really understanding how we can make that more interesting and how we can get more data from it. That's going to be definitely a theme throughout our conversation, is very much the year of data and analytics, and trying to see how those changed behaviors and changed COVID changes generally have impacted what we do. Are we hitting the mark? Are we meeting those success criteria? And so we definitely need the data to be able to do that.
The Internal Comms Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by Circle. Your company would not have been able to navigate COVID-19 related closures without the power of internal communications, keeping your employees safe and engaged. Armed with advanced analytics available in Circle Broadcast, you can demonstrate the true value of your department to the C-suite. Learn more at circle.com/value. Now, we've laid out Lauren's strategy session, particularly her bucket system, in a handy guide that you can download for free at internalcommspro.com/show notes. Just click on this episode. Now, in this next part, we learn Lauren's secret to how she is going to get her wish list for 2021 approved. And she gives more tips on how to successfully facilitate a strategy session with your team. Now, let's jump back in. I love that. And I love the idea of how you laid out that whole strategy day to, number one, have a day, give them homework so people come prepared. You're not just thrown into this boardroom and spring it on them of what we're doing. So they have time to think and plan and prepare, and they're empowered. And is such value, for our audience, and particularly if people have been thrown into a leadership role and now they're leading a team. How do you do that and get your team involved and make the process amazing, which it sounds like you did. Any other tips that you can give us on, as people are planning their high level strategies for 2021? Anything that you guys are planning on doing from a high level standpoint that you're able to share? What are you worried or struggling about? What are you refining for 2021? Any other insights, particularly before, we get into some of the other parts? I want to dive into the data question too. So any other high level things that you could maybe share with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, definitely. I think strategically, and I know we spoke about this in our pre-conversation, but with internal comms, we've never been cooler than when we have been right now in COVID times. We've never been more relied upon, and thankfully, the business has never seen our value as much as they have now, and realizing that you can't just throw a story on the internet and hope that people watch it or see it or read it or even comprehend it. So it's riding that wave of cool factor is certainly, in a strange sense, our strategic view, and seeing, okay, now that we've got people's attention in and around the powers that be, how do we make sure that they see our worth, see our value, and see continued value, I guess, in investing in our team? So that might be around resources, So human head count, that one's probably unlikely given the current circumstances, but we can but try. And then it's probably also around resources in terms of, I guess, infrastructure, software that we really would desperately like to have, different ways of doing it, and physical resources. So more cameras or microphones or software that we might be able to utilize. So I guess putting our little Christmas wish list forward, and making sure that those people who do make those decisions for us, are well aware of why we would need it and well aware of the improvements it can have to their strategies if we do have these things at our disposal.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So you've got your strategy, you're decluttering your channels. I love that. I know some folks have said another channel is direct mail, mailing things home, which is a new channel now, right? I know we've talked to other folks that the employees are used to a consumer grade experience, so they're trying to up their game and refresh, like the hole in the woolen sweater. All right, maybe we need to do a refresh of this look to make it more modern or whatever. So when you're putting together that Christmas wish list, do you have any tips on how are you going to go get that budget? Are you developing those relationships, and if so, with who? Can you give us some insight into, if I am trying desperately to get the funding and tools, any tips from your neck of the woods of maybe what you're planning and what your strategy is to secure those for 2021?
Absolutely. I think data does come into it. I think we've probably been a little bit blind in how our channels are performing, if we're being totally honest. And so, firstly, it's trying to get a decent reporting framework in place so that we know what all of the output that we put together, what are the metrics that we can really create and show the value or the success or the failures of that particular campaign or that particular output. So it's gathering up all of those outputs, getting the data so that but then most importantly, is translating that data into a language that the powers that be respond to. And I think that's probably been a gap that we've had over the years, is that we haven't quite figured out what language they speak. And so we think it might be English, but it might be something different. So we need to make sure we hit each of those areas of the business, because they are very diverse, and understand what speaks to them. What does success in internal comms look like for our bank team might be very different to what our insurance claims team want to see from their success. So it's getting the data, translating it into something that that speaks their language and that they can see value in, and sort of, I guess, translates to their own KPIs and values, so that it is like for like, apples for apples. And then I guess it's being really good at internal PR, really, is making sure that when you've got the data, you're speaking to those leaders and you're feeding those successes or failings or learnings back to those senior leaders, because we're probably, as communicators, great at communicating other people's strategic views and stories and ideas up the line to our people and our staff. But what we're probably not great at is going back to those leaders and saying, hey, look, what we tried really worked, and this is why, and this is what we would advise you to do next time we come across this same problem. So yeah, I guess, yes, doing a little internal PRing doesn't hurt either.
I love that. And with your backstory of being an external and being a broadcast journalist, I mean, wow, what it positions you, I think, in such almost an internal sales leadership role to sell, the value, of your team. Such a good tip. I love that. Talk to me about when you were leading your team, before we move off on the kind of whiteboarding strategic planning session. Any learnings from that day, like maybe some do's, maybe some don'ts, before we kind of move on? I want to make sure I capture your insights and learning from leading the team in that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think I touched on it earlier, but I think definitely having your team present to you and not the other way around gets a lot more buy-in from your members of your team, because I think some people might think a strategy day is pretty boring and probably not something that they want to be spending their whole day doing. But you've got to get buy-in from people to understand the bigger picture. Well, why do I have to present on how our videos are working for our people, and to explain to them that their little piece of the puzzle goes and creates a huge picture of what our people want, and ultimately this will change potentially how we do what we do to be more successful, to possibly be more fun, to be more strategic overall, and to make sure that you are being positioned in the company as being a success. And that's the best part, is we want to make sure that our that my team members are being seen as very valuable assets. All going back to riding that cool factor and riding that cool wave, to make sure people are like, wow, okay, I really get what these guys do, and they're a huge benefit to me and what I want to do across the company too. So getting buy-in is really important, but also collecting those action items throughout the day. So we actually turned out that the day of strategy session turned into 2 days, because we got so excited by the whole process that and probably seeing people in real life, that we said, let's do this again next week. So we had it 2 days in the end, but collecting those action items throughout as you're going. So put them up on a whiteboard, put them up on some chart paper, so that you can and assign it to someone to look into or to action. Because I think a lot of these sorts of days can become a real talk fest, and a lot of people going, yeah, that'd be a great idea, but and never really goes anywhere. And by the end of the financial year, you get to your next strategy session going, oh, yeah, we were going to do that, but we never got around to it. So being accountable is obviously a really big one when you get to these sorts of strategy sessions. And then something that I'm continuing to learn in my journey in internal comms is around change, and being that I have been fairly new as the manager of this team in relative terms, not new to RACQ, I've been here 8 years, but for this particular team, is understanding that when you are putting action items on and assigning it to people, that you're asking them to possibly change the way they've been doing things for quite some time, and realizing that that can be uncomfortable and that can be difficult for them to get that buy-in. So you don't want to scare people off by saying we're throwing everything out, we're ditching the whole thing and starting fresh. You've got to take people on the journey and really get them to understand what we're ditching, what we're altering, and why, so that we don't get too much fear at the end of that 2-day strategy session that people have no idea what their job is anymore.
To get a copy of Lauren's strategy guide, visit internalcommspro.com/show notes and click on this episode. Stay with us as our journey with Lauren continues next week. We will tap into her broadcast journalism background and get 2 storytelling guides that empower her team to connect the head and the hearts of their employees. Stay with us next week.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our theme music is Big Vision by Purple Planet Music. Don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.